Howdy Aggies, and welcome to the video that I'm doing for you about your quantitative data collection project. What you see on the screen right now is the survey that you will be sending out to 10 college students. By the time that you see this, you likely have taken the survey yourself, and so you'll be one of your 10 participants. And you most likely also have been sending out the link to this survey housed in Qualtrics to 10 other, or excuse me, to 9 other college students. So I wanted to talk about the survey a little bit first, and then we'll talk about the instructions that go along with this assignment. So notice the first two items up here are that you have your participants put your last name and your first name in these two questions. Notice that they're not numbered. They're not really part of the survey. They are simply what I look at to give you credit for actually collecting this data. Then we get into the first 10 questions. The first 10 questions are considered demographic questions. They are in different formats. Some of them are categorical, so things like your gender, and then some of them are quantitative, so age, GPA, approximately how many average, or on average, how many hours of sleep does a participant receive per night or get per night. So all three of those, 2, 3, and 4, are quantitative in nature. 5, what year in college are they? Ethnicity. Notice that they can also write in an ethnicity that's not listed there. And then 7, 8, 9, and 10 are related to some fitness and health related aspects of the participants. So 7, 8, and 9, how do they rank their fitness, diet, and overall level of body fat? And they can write a number in there between 1 and 10. And then question 10, how do they rate their overall health? 1 being poor, 2 being okay, but and 3 being, or could be better, 3 being excellent. And then I have a little break in the action. So those first 10 questions are our demographic questions. Then we have another section of the survey, and basically it is asking to have the college student think about themselves and how they feel about themselves as a college student. And in the statements over on the left, it talks about tasks. And so tasks for our purposes are related to assignments that you and your participants have as a college student. So quiz, homework, test, paper, project, presentation, or possibly something similar that I have not listed there. So for question 11, you'll notice Q1 down to Q10. So question 11 has 10 items where the participants rate themselves as strongly agree being 1, strongly disagree 1, disagree 2, agree 3, and strongly agree as 4. If you can think back to the previous video that we did and the article that you have on who knows more about food allergies, managers, or employees, that article actually talks about a Likert scale. So Likert scales are what you see here, where there are labels and then numbers associated with how that person actually rates their or feels about themselves. So after you yourself or your participant read question number 1, no matter how much energy, if they put, they agree with that statement, that would have them, that statement worth 3 points to them. And I'm pointing that out because when we get to the instructions, I'll talk about how you actually score this questionnaire. So there's question 11, and there's 10 statements on a 4-point Likert scale, strongly disagree to agree. And then we'll slowly move down and look at question 12. And basically it's the same descriptor there at the very beginning. And again, 10 statements, Q1 through Q10. Again, task is something related to what the student, you or your participants do as a college student. and they can now strongly disagree, which is equal to 4 points, or strongly agree, which is equal to 1 point, and then there's some options in between. And then the very last section deals with people thinking about themselves as a college student, and kind of how have they felt about themselves, probably let's say around in the last month. It doesn't say that there, but they can check all that applied. And so I believe there are 10 items here, and then someone can actually say that they have felt none of those. So that's the survey that you and your participants will take, and notice that they will know that they've gotten to the end of the survey when they see this. We thank you for taking the survey. So let's take a look at the instructions for the actual assignment. So again, you're collecting data from 10 college students, and the title of the survey is the Coping Competence Survey. There's a link here in the instructions. I will have already sent this to you by the time that you're probably seeing this video. Notice that, again, that you can be one of your 10 participants, and that is really important that your individuals put your last name and then your first name into the those first two questions that aren't numbered. Next thing talks about how I'm going to know that you have your 10, because that is part of your grade. And then it also talks about that Qualtrics does keep track of dates and IP addresses, etc. So do send this out to 9 other people, so that you get 10 separate people, including yourself, to actually fill this out, because I will monitor dates, times, and IP addresses. So for this assignment, you are going to be writing portions of a methodology section of an article, like you would see in an article, and then a results section. So I felt like I've got some fairly descriptive instructions here, but again, you can see participants, instrument, and results, and then you will also reference the instrument, and I'll show you how to do that. You can, on the very first page, you don't need a title page, so on the very top of the first line of your first page, you can put a title of your paper. You can make that up. You've seen titles of articles up to this point. You can make yours up. That's centered on the top of your first page. Then you do a normal regular double space, and then now from everything going forward is now left justified, and the remainder of your paper is simply double spaced throughout. So the first section of your paper will be participants. So the term participants is typed and then left justified, and after you type participants, you'll simply do a normal double space, indent a paragraph, and follow the instructions that you see here. So in your participant section, your first 2 to 3 sentences will describe the participants or the subjects for your study. So how were they selected? What was the criterion for selection? Were there any common characteristics that you used to select your subjects? So in a previous video, we talked about the best way to get subjects is to randomly select them. Most likely for this, you did not put a bunch of names of your friends in a big pot and select them. You probably asked them simply to participate. And so I'm going to leave that up to you to decide whether those are now considered volunteers or a convenient sample. So that's how you selected them. The criterion for selection was that they were college students. And then if there were any common characteristics, I've had students that work at a specific place with a bunch of college students. And so you might say something like, all participants worked with me at the student services office for the president. And I don't even think that's an office, but if there happened to be any common characteristics among your participants, all participants were members of the blah, blah, blah fraternity. at Texas A&M. So that's what that third bullet means. The next several sentences will summarize the demographic information that we just saw in the first 10 questions of the survey. So that was that first block of questions. And notice here that I'm having you present this information for all 10 participants as a whole. Do not break them into any groups at this point in time, because we haven't even talked about groups yet. So no breaking into groups at this point. So looking at the bullets, excuse me. So looking at the bullets under this 5 to 7 sentences here to summarize demographic information, you're going to look at the first 6 questions, and you're going to take 2 quantitative and 2 qualitative variables. And then for questions 7 through 10, which were the fitness and health related questions, you're going to select 2 of those 4 quantitative variables. All of your summarization here will be in sentence form. So I know a number of you just got out of 391 with me, and I had you do, for your last project, a combination of graphs and sentences and tables. But the purpose of this is for you to get used to writing as if you're writing for a journal article. And for the most part, and there's going to be an exception to this later on, but for the most part, that is only going to be in sentence form. So notice in sentences is bolded here. So for anything that I have asked you to summarize quantitative variables, that very specifically means you need to calculate mean, standard deviation, and if you want to give the range of scores, that's fine too. I wouldn't necessarily give it for all of them, all of the quantitative, but you can, but I would give it for some of them, and you can decide. For any of the qualitative variables, that is all going to be given as percentages. That's really the only way in sentence form that you can present qualitative data. So percentage male and female would be sufficient here. I'm also going to be in Canvas in the instructional materials. I'll be giving you some handouts about presenting data according to APA, so I would definitely take a look at that. So just kind of summarizing with your participant section, anywhere from probably 7 to 8 sentences to 10 sentences that follow the directions that you see here. And again, this is for all 10 people together. The next section of your paper will be the instrument section. And basically, this is where you simply describe the instrument. You describe what I just showed you in Qualtrics. Honestly, for this particular section, we're only going to describe questions 11 and 12, because those are the sets of question 11 and 12 are very specifically related to coping competence. So after you finish your participant section, the next section is the instrument section. So right after that last sentence in participants, a regular double space, type the word instrument, that is left justified, regular and double space, indent your instrument section, and then you're going to start writing. Very specifically here, you're going to write 5+ sentences that describe the surveys related to coping competence. And again, that's very much questions 11 and 12 only. I think the article that I reviewed for you in the voiceover for the quantitative article review, I think it gives some good paragraphs about different sections of the instrument that they use there. I would probably stay away from maybe the first section of that, because that was their demographic stuff. So any of those other sections in that article would be a good guidance for you for this. So very specifically, the items that are bulleted here need to be talked about in this section. And I would pretty much put them in this order. It doesn't make sense to talk about interpreting the results of this instrument first. In fact, that's the very last thing that you probably will talk about. So kind of starting at the top of this list, the name of the instrument and a reference for it. I'll talk about referencing a little bit later in this video. Talk about a little bit, what does the survey measure? Again, you'll see that a little bit later. How many questions are there? How do the participants respond? And again, that's a Likert scale. Again, you can look back to that quantitative article review and see how they wrote about it. How do you score the instrument? Again, there's a section later on in this document that talks about that. What are the possible ranges of scores? And then lastly, how do you interpret the scores? So again, see the end of this document for information about how, or some of the answers to the questions here. All of that, these 5+ sentences that just describe questions 11 and 12 for this instrument go in your instrument section. Nextly, you are going to calculate or write about a results section. So again, right after the last sentence in your instrument section, a regular double space, type the word results, it's left justified, normal double space, indent your paragraph, and then we'll just go through this line by line. But the first sentence in your results section will be a mean or overall mean, standard deviation, and the range of your total competence scores for all 10 people. So not doing anything with grouping yet. We're just giving the range of total coping competence, mean, standard deviation, and range of scores for that. Nextly, you will form your two groups. The example I've given here is male and female. You do want to try to keep your groups approximately the same size, and you don't really need to you do not have to use males and females. In fact, you can use any of the questions, the demographic questions 1 through 10, to form your groups. So it's actually always nice if you have something that's sort of naturally forming. So 5 males and 5 females. If you have, a group that's like 5 underclassmen that are freshman, sophomore, and then 5 that are junior, seniors, or graduate students. If you have to, you can create your groups based on, those that had their total fitness level, physical fitness level, the highest, and then the 5 lowest. So you can sort of what I would call artificially create your two groups by using something that's numerical and dividing them to higher and lower GPAs, some of those things. The main thing here is that you do keep them pretty even if you can. And then what you will do is calculate an independent t-test to see if there is a significant differences in total coping competence between your groups. So in a moment, we'll talk about how do you actually calculate total competence. It's real simple. It's written out on the bottom of this document here in a few moments. So your dependent variable is total coping competence. And so you'll put your data into Excel, have Excel create your output. You'll need to be able to read the output, and then write a results section. I've actually written it for you, and all you have to do is fill in the blanks for your set of data with what I have bolded here. So results, the term results is left justified, regular double space, a sentence, maybe 2, giving the overall total confidence, mean, standard deviation, and range of observed scores. And then you'll start with an independent t-test was used to determine if significant differences exist between Democrats and Republicans with regard to total coping competence. So notice I bolded Democrats and Republicans because that's your grouping variable. On our survey, it doesn't ask political affiliation. So you'll fill in that Democrats and Republicans with whatever your grouping variable is, males and females. The next sentence is based on the data collected, and then you will say, related to you reading your output, either you have a significant difference was found or no significant difference was found between the groups. And then you will copy this numerical stuff exactly how it is. T, open parentheses, 8. That is your degrees of freedom, close parentheses. So if you have exactly 10 people, everyone's degrees of freedom will be 8. Equal to, and this is your T observed. And remember, this is your T-stat on our output, comma, P equal, and then this is your p-value, your two-tailed, I can't remember exactly what it says on the output, but two-tailed, it's the only two-tailed thing that you see on at the bottom of that Excel output. Period. Notice that T and P are in italics per APA. And then the last sentence in this little paragraph is where you tell me as the reader what were your observed means for your groups. So here I've written Democrats were found to have a higher or lower total coping competence compared to Republicans. Again, fill in your blank however you want to. And then you're going to give the actual scores, means and standard deviations for your grouping variable. So Democrats had an average score of 22.3, parentheses, SD equal. So what's the standard deviation of your, whichever group you're talking about. Notice that SD is in italics, while Republicans, and actually let me go ahead and bold that while we're here. While Republicans had an average score of, and again, you'll fill in your mean and standard deviation for your second group. I do want you to include at the end of this, underneath your references, your Excel output. So just import that into this paper at the bottom, so on the third page, and we'll get to that in a minute. So bring that Excel output into this document at the very end. Do not put it in your results section. After you've presented this statement, the paragraph that I've given you here, again, just copy and fill it in. Do double space it per APA. But then you're going to present your group means in a histogram. So using Excel, while you're in Excel, getting this Excel output, just go ahead and create a histogram of your group means, and then bring that in right under this paragraph. And then the last section, and I would probably go ahead and start a new paragraph here, and you're going to summarize data from question 13. And so remember, question 13 dealt with feelings that the student had felt about themselves as a student. And what I would suggest doing is pick maybe the 3 that you observed the most among your 10 people, and then the 3 that you observed the least among your 10 people. And again, you'll present those as percentages. So that is the results section. Probably 2 paragraphs there, I would say. And then you're going to go to a next page. So references always start on a new page. So start on a new page for your reference of your resource. Again, that's the last thing I'm going to show you in this document. References is centered at the top of the page. You can make that singular if you want to, because it's actually simply one reference. Normally we'll use the term references. And you're going to reference the survey with the information on the next page. while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and type in import your Excel output for your independent t-test below your reference. All right, so that'll remind you to bring in that Excel output for your independent t-test. And then let's look at the very last page here. This has some information about the survey itself. So the way that you'll get total competence scores is you'll look at the 10 responses for question 11 and you'll add them up. And if you looked at it very closely, strongly disagree to strongly agree for question 10 had a slightly different Likert scale than for question 11. So be sure that you add those up properly. So question 10, you'll add up the 10 score, or excuse me, question 11, you'll add up the 10 scores, how they reported on the Likert scale for each person. Then you'll do the same thing for question 12. And then you'll add those two totals up to create this total coping competence. So create a total coping competence score by adding the totals for question 10, I don't know, I keep saying 10. So for question 11 and 12. Once you do that, the possible scores are a low of 20 and a high of 80. And if you kind of think about it, if someone has ones on everything and there's 20 possible questions, that would be that low of 20. And if someone says 4 on all 20 questions, 4 times 20 is 80, that would be, that high of 80. The way that you interpret this, though, is that lower scores indicate better coping. So a lower total coping competence score indicates better coping, a better ability to cope, while higher scores indicate what we'll consider worse coping competence. So this is some information about how to find that total score, how to interpret it, the possible range of scores, and then here below is the information that you'll need for your in-text reference of the instrument, as well as the information that you'll need for the reference in that reference list. So thanks for listening, and I'll be available to answer questions about this. I will be holding some office hours, and so if you have questions, be sure that you do attend. Obviously, those will be before this is due so that we can make sure we get this in a nice, concise format. One last comment about this. In your research proposal that you'll write at the end of this class, you will be writing a section of the proposal that will have participants, will have instruments, and then we'll add one other, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But this does lead into that very last project that you will turn in for our class. Have a great day.